I knew that when the power went out in the ICU at midnight, 200 elderly patients on ventilators would slowly suffocate to death. But at 12:01 a.m., when my daughter Emily frantically asked me what to do, I calmly played on my phone, completely unconcerned. That's because in my previous life, as soon as the power went out, I immediately went to connect the backup power supply and checked on each elderly patient one by one. After finishing, I passed out from exhaustion. At some point, Emily burst in with her colleagues and forcibly dragged me up. "Dad, isn't saving lives your sacred duty? How could you cruelly murder those elderly patients?" That's when I learned that all the elderly patients in the ICU had suffocated to death without exception. The police arrested me, saying I was the only one inside, and my fingerprints were found on the power switch. Emily produced a video to actively assist the investigation. My dad often complained that the elderly patients in the ICU were troublesome and wished they would all die. My wife Linda bitterly accused me. "You killed so many elderly people. You don't deserve to be a doctor." Enraged family members of the patients swarmed and beat me to death. I died not understanding. The ventilators were working normally, so how did those elderly patients suffocate? Why did my own daughter produce a fake video to frame me? When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the moment the power went out. The lights suddenly went dark, and the beeping of the monitors stopped. "Oh no, the power's out," I blurted out. Emily pretended to ask anxiously, "Dad, what do we do now?" I calmly turned on my phone's flashlight and looked around. Emily had just started her medical residency at the hospital where I worked after getting her master's degree. I had been supervising her. In my previous life, the power also went out at this time. She told me to stay and connect the backup power, while she went to report to the hospital director. But she never came back until everything went wrong. "Dad," Emily stomped her foot impatiently when she saw me not reacting. "What do we do now? If all these elderly patients die, we're finished." She knew how serious the situation was, so why did she disappear without a trace last time? Some of the more lucid elderly patients noticed the monitors had gone silent and started calling for help. The patients relying on ventilators to stay alive were struggling to breathe, their faces turning red. I felt terrible for them, but I knew they wouldn't be in immediate danger, so I continued to feign calm. Emily was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan, yelling at me, "You're the head of the ICU, these are all your patients. Are you really going to just let them die?" In my previous life, I would have rushed to check on the patients and sternly scolded her. But after going through that experience, I was no longer so panicked. I noticed that although she seemed anxious on the surface, her eyes couldn't hide her malicious intent. I suddenly wondered, could the power outage be related to her? I shrugged and snapped back irritably. How am I supposed to save them? There are nearly 200 elderly patients in the ICU. Do you expect me to push them all out one by one? Emily was suddenly at a loss for words, looking very displeased. She spoke even more harshly. "So you're just going to watch them all die here? Are you even human?" I sat down helplessly and glanced at the elderly patients. What can I do? It would take over 3 hours to get all these elderly patients out. This one might die before I can save that one. Whether one dies or 100 die, I'm screwed either way. Might as well stay here and watch them all die. I'll take whatever punishment comes. As I spoke, I gently stroked her face and smiled resignedly. At least my daughter will be by my father's side when he dies. I guess my love for you wasn't wasted after all. Emily violently pulled her hand away and screamed at me like a madwoman. "You're insane. You want to drag me down with you? I don't have a father like you." With that, she ran away like crazy, looking back as if afraid I would chase after her and implicate her. Watching her fleeing figure, my mood instantly plummeted. I had cherished and doted on her since she was little. But now when trouble came, she abandoned me without a second thought, and even said she didn't have a father like me. More and more elderly patients were calling for help, their voices rising and falling. The situation was growing dire. Looking at the closed door, I smiled bitterly. For a full 10 hours, not a single person came from the hospital. It was as if we had been completely abandoned. At 10 a.m. the next day, family members coming to visit all gathered outside the ICU. Seeing it pitch black inside, they instantly panicked and started shouting, "Why are there no lights at all? Don't tell me the power's out." "Shit, don't scare me. My dad's 90 years old and relies entirely on a ventilator. If the power's out, what will happen to him? Let's break down the door and push the elderly patients out. Maybe we can still save them." The other family members thought this was a good idea and were about to do it. Just as they were about to break down the door, I opened it from the inside and walked out. "Oh, Dr. James, you're inside. Then we have nothing to worry about." That's right, I was just about to tell you all. Dr. James has impeccable ethics. With him there, everything will be fine. "Dr. James, I haven't had any news about my dad for 7 to 8 days. How is he doing? Can I see him?" The family members' eyes were filled with tears. The elderly patients in the ICU were all critically ill. The only filial duty they could fulfill was the weekly visit. Seeing their pleading eyes, I was about to speak when suddenly someone pushed through the crowd and publicly accused me. James, even if you're my dad, I absolutely won't be your accomplice. You knew that after the power went out, those 200 elderly patients could die at any moment. Yet you did nothing and watched them suffocate to death with your own eyes. You even wanted to drag me down with you. You're not fit to be a doctor, let alone a father. I'm ashamed of you. Emily glared at me furiously, as if we had some deep, irreconcilable grudge. She was my own daughter. With her coming forward to accuse me, the family members instantly broke down. Several women collapsed to the ground in despair, covering their faces and wailing loudly. Some men gritted their teeth and glared at me as if they wanted to tear me to pieces. Others had already pushed past me to kick at the door, hoping to save their parents. But it was a steel airtight door with a passcode lock. Only I could open it. Before I could say anything, another person squeezed into the crowd. It was my wife Linda. In my previous life, if I hadn't drunk the coffee she bought me, I wouldn't have slept so deeply, and those elderly patients wouldn't have died so mysteriously. Things were becoming clear. Fine, since you want to frame me, I'll make sure everyone knows about it. I shrugged helplessly and said with resignation, over 200 elderly patients and just one doctor. How could I save them all? I can't be in multiple places at once. How could I possibly get all your parents out at the same time? If I save this one, I can't save that one. Someone was bound to die. Which of you would be willing to let your own parents stay behind to die? In my previous life, I had wanted to say this. Back then, I desperately went to connect the backup power supply, but each power unit weighed over 150 pounds. After finishing, I collapsed from exhaustion. When I saw the elderly patients were all safe and sleeping peacefully, I felt it was worth all the hardship and fatigue. But when I woke up, everyone was accusing me of causing the elderly patients to suffocate to death. Even these family members who had just been praising my ethics believed it without a doubt. They beat and kicked me without letting me explain, beating me to death. Saving lives was my duty. I didn't expect gratitude from everyone. But since they all thought I was a murderer, I might as well not bother. Before I finished speaking, the family members completely lost it. They angrily surged towards me, their imposing manner exactly the same as when they beat me to death in my previous life. Linda saw the moment had come and rushed up to slap me. James, you're the head of our ICU. You just received an award last month. How can you be so inhumane? Your daughter righteously exposed the truth, but not only do you make excuses, you're here saying cold-hearted things. Who would be willing to let their parents die? Even if you only saved a few, at least it would show you tried your best. But you didn't save a single one. You're worse than an animal. Seeing the mother and daughter speaking in perfect unison, I sighed softly and didn't argue. I wanted to see how they would continue to frame me. Linda gave Emily a look. Emily immediately took out a pre-prepared video and played it for everyone at maximum volume. In the video, I was ranting like a madman, spewing complaints and vicious words. Looking at you old geezers who won't die makes me sick. You're all 70 or 80 years old. Why don't you just die already instead of clinging to life? You're just wasting air and resources. What are you looking at? Sooner or later I'm going to shut off your ventilators and let you all suffocate. In my previous life, Emily posted this video online, causing outrage across the internet. The family members swarmed me, punching and kicking, slapping my face, even stabbing me with knives, beating me to death. The real culprits were this mother and daughter pair. Coming back to my senses, I still felt pain all over my body. At this point, Linda could no longer hide the wild joy in her eyes, but she still put on a righteous act. James, I've been your wife for 20 years, yet I never realized you were a wolf in sheep's clothing. The whole hospital has power except your unit, and it just happens to be during your shift. You're the murderer. Emily shook her head in disappointment. I don't have a father like you. You taught me to respect the elderly, but now you've killed 200 elderly patients with your own hands. You deserve to be cut into 1,000 pieces. Incited by the mother and daughter, the family members now all had bloodshot eyes, like angry beasts ready to tear me to pieces. Scum. I treated you like a life-saving benefactor. Tui. You're not even human. You butcher. My mom raised me through thick and thin, and you killed her. I'll make you pay blood for blood. We came from far away for you to save lives. But you killed my dad. I want your life. The family members who had been kicking the door now surrounded me from behind, about to attack. At this critical moment, a stern shout froze everyone. Stop. Everyone turned to look. 7 or 8 police officers rushed in, separating the crowd. Someone reported that a doctor at this hospital abused his position to deliberately kill elderly patients. Who is James? Come with us. The family members glared at me fiercely, their fingers almost jabbing my face. It's this butcher who killed my dad. Arrest him and execute him. Why waste words on this scum? Kill him. A life for a life. Kill him. The scene from my previous life was playing out again. It all seemed meticulously planned in advance, with everything falling into place. If I hadn't lived through this once before, I would surely be at a loss now and fall victim to their scheme again. After calming myself, I looked at the police and said calmly, "I didn't kill anyone. You need evidence to accuse me of murder. Otherwise it's malicious defamation, and I will pursue legal action." Linda laughed coldly and immediately smiled ingratiatingly at the police. "Officer, I'm the one who called the police. I'm also his wife Linda and a doctor at this hospital. I have ironclad evidence that can prove James killed 200 elderly patients." Hearing this, the police officers instantly became highly alert. 200 elderly patients? This is no joke. Can you take responsibility for what you're saying? Linda patted her chest and said, "The ICU has always had an independent power supply. Even if the whole hospital lost power, it shouldn't be possible here. But last night the power was out for 10 hours. It must have been deliberate. Also, I can guarantee with 100% certainty that James' fingerprints will be on the power switch." Seeing her speak so confidently, the gathered family members became even more enraged and tried to rush forward to hit me. If not for the police officers desperately holding them back, I would have been beaten to death already. Instead of retreating, I stepped forward and shouted, "If you kill me, you'll never know who really murdered your parents." Linda and Emily exchanged a glance, both looking a bit guilty, before continuing to shout defiantly, "The evidence is irrefutable. Are you still trying to deny it? James, I advise you to confess quickly, or it will only get worse for you. Officer, don't believe my dad's lies. Every time he does something wrong he refuses to admit it. Take him away quickly." Some family members who had hesitated after hearing my words now all prostrated themselves, weeping bitterly. "Mom, your son is unfilial. I entrusted you to this heartless beast for treatment, causing you to die tragically." "Officer, my dad had late-stage cancer. His last wish was to see his family again. Now it's all been ruined by this animal. A life for a life. He killed 200 elderly people. We'll give him 200 stab wounds, not one less." Looking at the over 100 wailing family members, the police officer angrily grabbed my arm. "So many people are accusing you of being the murderer. James, please come with us to cooperate with our investigation and clear things up." Seeing him take out handcuffs, I calmly blocked his hand. "I didn't kill anyone. You have no right to arrest me." Turning around, I entered the passcode on the lock. Beep. The steel door slowly opened. At this moment, I felt incredibly relieved. It was finally time for me to fight back. All the elderly patients were lying in their beds, breathing rhythmically, completely unharmed. The lucid patients even turned their heads to look at me, their eyes full of kindness and gratitude. Seeing this, my eyes instantly welled up with tears. Sometimes I really don't need them to thank me verbally or give me honorary banners. Just one grateful look makes me feel that all my efforts were worthwhile. At this moment, a 90-year-old patient reached out his hand, gesturing for me to come over. After a period of treatment, his condition had clearly improved and he could speak clearly and forcefully. "Dr. James, you've worked so hard these past days. If you hadn't saved me in time last night, I surely would have died. Thank you so much." The family members who had been cursing me just moments ago were now all struck dumb. They stood rooted to the spot, completely motionless. When they came to their senses, they rushed in to find their parents, eyes brimming with tears, overcome with emotion. "Mom, are you all right? Dad, I thought I'd never see you again." After confirming their parents were alive, many family members knelt down and kowtowed to me. "Dr. James, I'm so sorry for wrongly accusing you." Others slapped themselves and pounded the ground in remorse. "I'm not human. Dr. James, you worked so hard to save my mom, but I believed others' false accusations and was convinced you killed her. I even shouted about killing you. I'm the one who's worse than an animal." Seeing so many people apologizing and begging forgiveness, I quickly told them to get up. Although they beat me to death in my previous life, it was because they had seen their parents actually dead and lashed out in extreme grief. Ultimately, it was Linda and Emily's fault. They were the true culprits. The police officer who had been about to handcuff me now understood the truth and took the initiative to apologize. "Dr. James, we didn't investigate thoroughly and almost caused a terrible mistake. We wronged you. I sincerely apologize to you. I'm so sorry." I immediately helped them up, smiling. "It's all right. It was just a misunderstanding. Now that it's cleared up, everything's fine. Since the elderly patients are all okay, we'll be leaving now." I quickly reached out to stop them, glancing at Linda and Emily. "Officer, now that you can prove I didn't kill those 200 elderly patients, how should we deal with the people who maliciously slandered me and even produced fake evidence?" The police officer followed my gaze to the mother and daughter pair. He immediately went over to question them. "You insisted when you called that Dr. James killed 200 elderly patients. You even incited these family members to nearly cause him bodily harm. How do you explain yourself now?" Linda was startled, her face changing dramatically. She unconsciously took a step back. I had thought she would immediately admit her mistake and beg forgiveness, but I didn't expect her to continue spewing vicious lies. Officer, don't believe his nonsense. The police officer snorted angrily and pointed at Linda, berating her. You're still slandering Dr. James as talking nonsense? The elderly patients are all fine now. Who's really talking nonsense? Also, didn't you say you had evidence proving Dr. James was the murderer? Where's the evidence? If you can't produce it, I won't let you escape legal punishment. The silence in the hallway of the intensive care unit was suffocating. Dozens of family members, who minutes ago had been screaming for my blood, stood, frozen in shame. Many had their heads bowed, unable to meet my eyes. The metallic scent of hospital-grade disinfectant hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the steady, rhythmic hum of ventilators operating in perfect harmony. The lead investigator, Detective Miller, turned his sharp, calculating gaze from the open ward back toward Linda. His hand rested heavily on his duty belt. Well, ma'am. Miller's voice was low, carrying the weight of a seasoned detective who had seen every shade of human deceit. You called dispatch at 11:45 last night claiming a mass casualty event in progress. You stated on a recorded emergency line that Dr. James had deliberately severed the life support of 200 critical patients. You claimed you had video evidence and forensic certainty. Explain. Linda's chest heaved. Her carefully styled hair had come loose around her ears, and the foundation on her cheeks seemed to crack under the harsh fluorescent glare of the hallway. It's impossible. Linda stammered, stepping back until her shoulder hit the fire extinguisher on the wall. She grabbed Emily's arm with bruising force. The power was cut. The whole central grid to this wing went down at midnight. Emily saw it. Emily, tell them. Emily trembled violently. Her eyes darted across the crowd of furious family members, the stern police officers, and finally landed on me. Dad. Emily whimpered, her voice dropping into the sweet, fragile tone she had always used since childhood whenever she wanted to escape punishment. Dad. What did you do? Why did you pretend the patients were dying when I was in the room? Why did you let me run out in terror? I couldn't help but let out a quiet, hollow chuckle. Even now, she was trying to spin the narrative. She wanted everyone to believe I had played a cruel prank on her, that she was merely an innocent victim of my psychological games. I didn't pretend anything, Emily, I said, stepping forward. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. When the main breaker tripped at 12:01, you didn't check a single monitor. You didn't lay a single finger on a patient's pulse. You immediately asked me if we were finished. And the moment I didn't panic, you ran. Because you were acting like a lunatic. Emily shrieked, tears of pure adrenaline spilling down her face. You stroked my face and said we should just watch them die together. Did I? I pulled a sleek, thumb-sized device from my white coat pocket and held it up for Detective Miller and the officers to see. It was a professional-grade continuous audio-video body camera, the kind used by trauma surgeons during high-risk procedures for clinical review. The tiny green recording light was pulsing steadily. Emily's breath hitched. Linda went as white as a fresh sheet. As the head of this department, I stated calmly, I instituted a new protocol 3 days ago requiring all supervisory staff to wear encrypted recording badges during graveyard shifts to ensure complete accountability during critical incidents. Everything that occurred in that ward from 11:30 last night until this very second is fully documented on the hospital's cloud server. I looked directly into my daughter's horrified eyes, including the moment the power went out, Emily, and including what happened before you arrived. Detective Miller, I continued, turning to the investigator. If you check the hospital's primary infrastructure logs, you will find that the ICU's main electrical conduit was manually disengaged from the basement substation at 11:58 p.m. Miller gestured to his partner, who immediately unclipped a radio and began barking orders to the officers stationed downstairs. However, I said, pointing toward the ceiling panels running along the corridor, what my wife and daughter failed to realize is that 3 months ago, following a state safety audit, our department installed an independent, pneumatic-assisted uninterrupted power supply (UPS) system. It is housed in a locked auxiliary vault on this floor, a vault to which only the department head holds the physical key. In my previous life, that auxiliary system had not been active because I hadn't pushed for its immediate inspection. In this life, the moment I woke up 4 days ago, the very first thing I did was sign the emergency procurement order to ensure the batteries were fully charged and the automated bypass was live. When the power was cut at midnight, the ventilators didn't fail. The monitors didn't die. The click and hiss of oxygen delivery continued without losing a single millibar of pressure. The only thing that went dark were the ambient ceiling lights in the hallway, the non essentiel cosmétique circuit. When Emily fled the room, I explained to the gathering crowd. She was so eager to seal my fate that she didn't even look at the digital telemetry screens. By the beds. She saw the room go dim, assumed her mother's plan had succeeded, and ran straight to the administrators to lay the groundwork for my arrest. "You bastard," Linda hissed under her breath. Her eyes were bloodshot, all semblance of maternal grace stripped away to reveal the feral desperation underneath. "You set us up." "I set you up?" I asked, looking at the woman I had shared a bed with for over 2 decades. "Linda, you bought me a thermos of dark roast coffee before my shift began. You made sure to remind me twice to drink it while it was hot." I reached into my medical bag sitting on the reception counter and pulled out the stainless steel thermos. The seal was still intact. "I didn't drink a single drop," I said. "And I suspect if Detective Miller's forensic team tests the contents of this flask, they will find a lethal concentration of zolpidem and midazolam, the exact same sedative cocktail missing from the pharmacy dispensary logs under your nurse manager credentials as of yesterday afternoon." Linda's knees buckled. The crowd of family members erupted into a roar of furious realization. She tried to drug him. They wanted our parents to die just to frame him. "You monsters. You absolute monsters." An elderly man, whose wife was recovering in bed 14, lunged forward with his cane raised, screaming at Linda. 2 police officers had to physically restrain him to prevent an immediate riot in the hallway. "Officer!" Linda screamed, scrambling behind Detective Miller's back, using the police as a human shield against the very mob she had incited. "He's fabricating this. He has no proof. Emily's video is real. He hates those patients. He complains about them every single night at home." "Let's talk about that video," Detective Miller said, his voice dripping with ice. He turned to Emily. "Miss James, hand over your phone. Now." Emily clutched her purse to her chest, backing away toward the emergency stairwell. "No. It's private property. You need a warrant." Under Section 148 of the Penal Code, given an active felony investigation involving attempted mass homicide and false reporting, your device is subject to immediate seizure, Miller snapped. Before Emily could turn to run, a female officer caught her by the shoulder, twisted her arm behind her back with practiced efficiency, and snatched the designer handbag from her grip. "Let go of me, Dad. Tell them to let me go," Emily shrieked, thrashing against the officer's grip. "I'm your daughter. How could you do this to me?" I stood there, watching her face contort with rage and fear. In my previous life, when the mob had surrounded me with fists and blades, I had looked at Emily with tear-filled eyes, begging her to tell them the truth. He had looked back at me with a cold, disgusted sneer and spat on my bleeding face. "You deserve it, old man," she had whispered in my ear while the first knife pierced my ribs. "Your pension and your life insurance belong to Mom and me. Now." The memory burned in my chest like white phosphorus. "Officer," I said, my voice steady as stone, "please proceed with the forensic extraction. The truth belongs to everyone here." The hospital's administrative conference room on the 10th floor was converted into an emergency command post within 30 minutes. Outside, the media had already caught wind of the disturbance. Satellite vans lined the perimeter of the medical center, their antennas reaching into the morning sky like metallic vultures. But instead of the headline Linda and Emily had envisioned, ICU director murdered 200 patients in power outage massacre. The breaking news ticker reading across national television was far more explosive. Mass homicide attempt thwarted at Metropolitan Hospital. ICU head unmasks. Family conspiracy. Inside the conference room, Detective Miller plugged Emily's smartphone into a high-speed forensic workstation operated by the precinct's cybercrime specialist. The large projector screen mounted on the wall flickered to life, mirroring the contents of the device. "Let's see the metadata on this alleged confession video," the specialist murmured, his fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. The video file was pulled up on the screen. It was the same clip Emily had broadcast to the mob in the hallway, my face looking wild and manic, screaming horrible obscenities about elderly patients wasting oxygen. The specialist ran a standard spectral analysis across the audio track. A series of red and yellow frequency spikes lit up the diagnostic panel. "It's an amateur deepfake," the specialist announced, shaking his head in disbelief. The facial mapping was trained using 24 home video clips, pulled from an iCloud backup labeled Family Vacation 2022. The voice synthesizer is an off-the-shelf neural model from an open-source software suite. "Look here, the phonetic cadence doesn't match the throat muscle contractions by nearly 80 milliseconds." The specialist clicked a single button. The screen isolated the underlying render logs. Created October 14th, 3:42 a.m. Render node, MacBook Pro Emily James. Source file. Project_retirement_phase2.mov. Project Retirement Phase 2, Detective Miller read aloud, his eyes narrowing, as he turned to face Emily, who was handcuffed to a steel chair in the corner of the room. Care to explain what Phase 1 was, Miss James? Emily kept her head down, her shoulders shaking with silent, ragged sobs. He didn't speak. She won't talk, Linda said suddenly, leaning over the table from her own handcuffed seat. Her voice was cracked, her mascara smeared across her cheekbones. She's just a child. I forced her to do it. I'm the one who told her to make the video. If anyone is going to prison, it should just be me. Mom, shut up. Emily suddenly screamed, snapping her head up, her face twisted in pure venomous panic. Don't you dare put this all on me. You were the one who slept with Thomas. You were the one who promised me we'd get $5 million and move to Switzerland. The conference room went dead silent. Detective Miller stopped pacing. Thomas? As in Dr. Thomas Vance, the Vice Director of Clinical Operations? Linda lunged across the table toward her daughter, her handcuffs rattling violently against the wood. Shut your mouth, you stupid little bitch. Shut up. He's the one who gave her the key to the basement breaker. Emily wailed, hysterically, completely unraveling. He promised her that once my dad was convicted of manslaughter, he would take over as chief executive of the hospital group. They took out 3 separate supplemental term life policies on my dad through an offshore brokerage in the Cayman Islands. They told me all I had to do was show the video and testify that Dad was depressed. I stood by the window, looking at the 2 women who had been my entire world. The pieces of the nightmare that had haunted my soul across 2 lifetimes finally fell into place with sickening clarity. It was never just about professional jealousy. It was never just about a daughter's spoiled entitlement or a wife's fading affection. It was an orchestrated execution for money, power, and corporate ambition. Within 2 hours, the scope of the investigation expanded beyond the local precinct. State prosecutors, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Healthcare Fraud Task Force, and the State Medical Board converged on Metropolitan Hospital. While Linda and Emily were being transported to the county detention facility, I led Detective Miller and a team of federal agents straight to the administrative suites in the East Wing. Dr. Thomas Vance was sitting behind his sprawling mahogany desk, calmly sipping espresso while reviewing a quarterly revenue forecast. When the door burst open, revealing 6 armed federal agents and me, his teacup paused halfway to his lips. Dr. James. Thomas set the cup down with a steady hand, his silver hair neatly parted, projecting an aura of undisturbed corporate elegance. What is the meaning of this intrusion? If this is about the minor electrical glitch in your unit last night, I've already instructed maintenance to save it, Thomas, I interrupted, tossing a thick blue folder onto his polished desk. The folder slid across the mahogany, knocking over an engraved silver pen holder. Thomas glanced down at the top document. The color drained from his face in a slow, terrifying wave. What is this? Thomas whispered. Those are the unauthorized batch testing logs for NeuroShield 9, the experimental neurological peptide your private biotechnology firm has been secretly administering to 75 of our comatose ICU patients over the past 6 months. I said, each word landing like a hammer blow. In my previous life, after I was dead, a minor scandal had broken out regarding unexpected fatalities in the ICU, but it had been swept under the rug as a consequence of the power failure. During the 4 days since my return, while pretending to be an oblivious, overworked husband, I had stayed late every night, accessing the hospital's encrypted clinical trial servers using my master diagnostic override keys. The drug failed its phase 2 animal trials in Germany due to acute respiratory paralysis. I continued, leaning over his desk, looking straight into his cold, calculating eyes. You knew that within 3 to 4 weeks, those patients would begin developing irreversible lung necrosis. When they died, their autopsies would have exposed your illegal human trials and bankrupted your shell company. Detective Miller stepped forward, pulling a pair of high-security steel cuffs from his tactical vest. You needed those patients to die all at once, Dr. Vance, Miller said. And you needed their cause of death to be simple, undeniable mechanical asphyxiation, caused by a catastrophic power grid failure during a night shift supervised by an unstable department head. That's absurd, Thomas said, his voice rising, his hands trembling as he reached for his phone. I am the vice chairman of the regional hospital authority. I have personal relationships with the governor. You cannot touch me, based on the ravings of an ICU physician. Your offshore bank accounts in Zurich and Grand Cayman were frozen 20 minutes ago under an emergency federal warrant, the lead FBI agent announced, stepping behind Thomas's chair. Your mistress, Linda James, and her daughter have already provided 4 hours of sworn video testimony detailing the conspiracy. The agent grabbed Thomas's wrists, pulling them behind his back. Click. The sound of the handcuffs engaging was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Thomas collapsed forward against his desk, his silver hair falling into his cold espresso, all his aristocratic arrogance evaporating into the suffocating reality of a life sentence in federal prison. 3 weeks later, the county courthouse was surrounded by thousands of citizens holding candles, banners, and photographs of the elderly patients who had been saved. The case had become the most watched criminal trial in state history. The media dubbed it the Ward of Shadows. I sat in the witness waiting room, dressed in a clean, dark charcoal suit, holding a warm cup of black tea. The door opened, and Detective Miller poked his head in. "James," Miller said gently, "your daughter's defense attorney requested a 5-minute personal meeting before the formal plea hearing begins. You don't have to see her. It's entirely up to you." I stared into the dark liquid in my cup for a moment. "Let her in, Detective." A moment later, Emily was escorted into the room by 2 armed bailiffs. She was wearing a faded orange prison jumpsuit, her wrists and ankles bound by heavy steel transport chains. Her hair was unwashed, her skin sallow and broken, out with stress-induced acne. The designer clothes, the arrogant smirk, the sharp, haughty demeanor she had carried since high school were completely gone. When she saw me sitting there, alive, dignified, and untouched, she collapsed to her knees on the linoleum floor. The chains clattered loudly against the ground. "Dad," Emily sobbed, crawling toward my feet, her chained hands reaching up to touch the cuffs of my trousers. "Dad, please. Please tell the judge I didn't know they were going to kill everyone. Please tell them I was just confused." I looked down at her. I searched my chest for the warmth I had felt when I taught her how to ride a bicycle. I searched for the pride I had felt when I pinned her white coat on her during her medical school graduation. There was nothing. The well of my paternal love had been completely drained, burned out by the memory of her laughter while a mob beat her father to death. "Emily," I said softly. She looked up, her tear-streaked face illuminated by a desperate, pathetic glimmer of hope. "Yes, Dad? You'll help me, right? You're my dad. Parents are supposed to forgive their children." "When you stood in that ICU hallway," I asked her, "did you think about the fact that I was your father?" Emily froze. "When you spent 3 hours rendering a deepfake video designed to ensure I would spend the rest of my life in a maximum security cage or be executed by the state," I continued, my voice smooth and calm as still water, "did you think about the white coat I bought you?" I was stupid. Mom tricked me." "No, Emily," I said, gently pulling my foot away from her trembling fingers. "Your mother gave you a choice, and you chose $5 million over your father's life. You chose to watch 200 innocent, defenseless elderly people suffocate in the dark so you could buy a villa in Europe." The bailiff stepped forward, grabbing Emily's arms to pull her back to her feet. "Dad, don't leave me," she shrieked, thrashing against the chains, her voice echoing down the stone corridor of the courthouse. "I'm your only child. Who is going to visit you when you get old? Who is going to carry on your name?" I stood up, adjusted the lapels of my suit jacket, and looked her in the eyes. "For the last time, a doctor's legacy is carried by the lives he saves, Emily," I told her quietly, "not by the monsters he accidentally raised." I turned my back on her and walked through the heavy oak doors into the courtroom. Behind me, her hysterical screams were swallowed by the click of the closing latch. The sentencing took 3 days to deliver. The courtroom was packed to the brim with over 300 journalists, medical professionals, and the families of the 200 patients. Judge Arthur Pendleton, a veteran jurist known for his uncompromising stance on public trust violations, adjusted his glasses and looked down from the bench at the 3 defendants standing in the prisoner's box. "In my 40 years on the bench," Judge Pendleton began, his deep voice resounding through the vaulted chamber, "I have rarely encountered a crime so devoid of basic human empathy, so utterly corrupt in its execution, and so treacherous to the sacred oaths of the medical profession." He picked up the first sentencing order. "Thomas Vance, for the crimes of racketeering, conspiracy to commit aggravated mass homicide, unauthorized human biological experimentation, and grand fraud against the state, you are sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms in the state maximum security penitentiary at Pelican Bay, without the possibility of parole. Furthermore, all personal and corporate assets totaling $42 million are hereby forfeited to the victim's restitution fund." Thomas did not make a sound. He simply closed his eyes and slumped forward against the wooden rail. Judge Pendleton turned to the second document. "Linda James, for the crimes of attempted murder of 200 dependent adults, aggravated assault with a controlled substance, extortion, and filing a false emergency report resulting in public endangerment, you are sentenced to 65 years in the Central California Women's Facility, with no eligibility for parole until you have served a minimum of 52 years. Linda let out a blood-curdling shriek, her fingernails tearing into her own face, as the bailiffs forced her down into her chair. Finally, the judge looked down at Emily. Emily James, you were an intern physician. You had sworn an oath to preserve human life above all else. Instead, you utilized advanced technological means to manufacture fraudulent evidence designed to facilitate the wrongful execution of an innocent physician, your own father, and to cover up the attempted slaughter of 200 patients under your care. Emily was hyperventilating, her teeth chattering so hard she bit her own tongue. You are sentenced to 28 years in the Department of Corrections, the judge declared, bringing his wooden gavel down with a deafening crack. Your medical license is permanently revoked. You are barred for life from ever entering any healthcare facility or holding any position of fiduciary trust. Court is adjourned. Bang! The courtroom erupted into a thunderous standing ovation. Family members embraced each other, weeping tears of pure relief. Journalists rushed to the exits to broadcast the verdict across the globe. I remained seated at the prosecution table for a long moment, listening to the heavy wooden sound of the gavel echoing in my mind. The debt had been paid. The nightmare of my past life was finally buried beneath the cold, unyielding weight of the law. 6 months later, the early morning sun poured through the high, arched windows of the Metropolitan Hospital's newly renovated North Wing. The air was fresh, carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine from the courtyard garden below. Above the double glass doors of the intensive care unit, a new brass plaque had been mounted in polished mahogany. The James Memorial Institute for Advanced Critical Care. Integrity in the dark. Compassion in the light. I walked down the central corridor of the ward, holding a leather clipboard. Beside me walked 2 third-year residents, bright, earnest young physicians who had been selected from over 1,000 applicants for our new clinical ethics fellowship. Dr. James, one of the residents, a young woman named Sarah, said as we stopped. By bed 12, patient Martinez in bed 4 has successfully been weaned off the ventilator. His arterial blood gases are completely stable. His granddaughter brought you this. She handed me a colorful, hand-drawn card with a picture of a stethoscope wrapped around a glowing red heart, with the words, "Thank you for giving us our grandpa back," written in a child's uneven handwriting. I ran my thumb over the crayon drawing, feeling a profound, tranquil warmth spread through my chest. At the far end of the ward, an elderly man in a navy cardigan was sitting up in a wheelchair, holding a cup of warm chamomile tea. It was Mr. Henderson, the 90-year-old patient who had reached out his hand to me on the morning the doors opened. "Morning, Dr. James," Mr. Henderson called out with a wide, toothy grin as I approached. "Are you finally going to sign my discharge papers today, or are you keeping me here just because you enjoy my company?" I smiled, pulling my pen from my pocket and signing the release order with a flourish. "You're free to go home, Mr. Henderson," I laughed softly. "Your son and daughter are already waiting in the lobby with your favorite peach pie." The old man grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly firm, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "God bless you, James," he whispered. "You saved all of us. Don't ever forget that." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I replied, squeezing his hand gently. "Take care of yourself." After the morning rounds were finished, I stepped out onto the wide, open-air balcony overlooking the city skyline. The autumn breeze was crisp and clean. Down in the streets below, the morning traffic moved in steady, purposeful streams. Life was moving forward, vibrant, noisy, and beautiful. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the simple silver wedding band I had worn for 22 years, and held it up to the morning sun. Then, with a calm, steady hand, I tossed it into the recycling container beside the bench. I took a deep, clean breath of the morning air. My life was no longer defined by the darkness of that midnight power outage. It was defined by the 200 heartbeats continuing to pulse steadily behind those glass doors, and the countless dawns waiting to be greeted. I turned back toward the ward, pushed open the doors and walked back into the light.